All right, we're in the presence of a quorum, and according to the tower clock, it is 7 o'clock, even though I think the clock's on the wall a little bit early. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. And as always, the first item on our agenda is citizens' concerns, which is an opportunity for people in the audience to briefly raise issues. No colloquy, no discussion. Typically, the town manager or somebody on the board will take it under advisement and take it offline. So, yes.
Hi, Tara Fredericks, West Acton. The first thing I'd like to report is that West Acton parking issue is resolved. It turns out that the people that had proposed to have the 2-hour limit was the Citizen Library. And when we explained about the 3-hour art classes, the Citizens Library offered the parking spaces in front of the Windsor building. So that's resolved, thank you. Something that hasn't been resolved, the 40B manual still doesn't include references to state law relative to historic protections for these buildings. So our local 40B manual that we control still doesn't include the historic protections steps that are required under law. A new thing that may not be so new, hopefully, is the H2420, the smart growth bill that the Mass Municipal Association calls a giveaway to developers that strips towns of the right to control zoning and approvals of projects. And we're discussing this at the DRB tomorrow night because they have architects, because I really would like to understand the impact.
Wednesday night.
Wednesday night, sorry.
Because I'll be there.
Yes, thanks. The impact on Acton, we haven't really studied it and don't know, and this is in committee at the State House. Jamie Eldridge hasn't even told us about it, and I think that it's important for us to be proactive and determine the impact, because if it does get passed, then we'll need to know the impact, and if it doesn't get passed, or excuse me, if it comes out of committee, we at least should be able to take a position as a town. So that's just an FYI. Report there's 12 cars in the parking lot with government plates on them, and so if you're looking for a spot and it's full, and there are 12 spots there, they could be at the fire station. The last two small things, the case, Kelly's Corner, I'm hoping that the Board of Selectmen will consider eminent domain and purchase that property so we can be in control of it long before we do any rezoning, because then the price goes up. And the last thing is Columbus Day. I feel like there are proposals all over the state being considered to officially recognize the day as Indigenous Peoples Day rather than celebrating genocide. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just mention that the MMA's opposition is not across the board. They do actually support some provisions. One of the things about that law is you do have to look at the individual comments of all the different parties that have weighed in that proposed bill. The MMA actually supports certain provisions, such as the proposal to basically impose a surcharge on developers.
Yes, they definitely, they like
yes. But you know, there are reasons, and their reasons for opposing it may differ from those of other people who are opposing it. But
yes. But they did issue an across the board. They don't like it. My last concern was about the school committee proposal, the building projects. There doesn't seem to be any sustainability analysis. And they've gone from like 4 choices to 3 choices to 2 choices to 1 choice, and now they're selling it. And I can't find any carbon footprint analysis. I can't find any water analysis. I can't find any sustainability
That's why they're having public meetings.
Okay.
You can weigh in with those concerns at any of the several public meetings that they're having.
Oh, yes, definitely. I'm hoping the Board of Selectmen will, since sustainability plan and sustainability was a top goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience, the vast audience? All right, the next item is Chairman's update, and I have a few items here. First of all, the Town Manager Search Committee is conducting a community outreach forum on Thursday, 26th of October from 7 to 9 p.m. in this room. The committee is seeking input on the major issues and challenges the town is facing and the qualities, education, background that the next town manager should possess. If you can't attend the meeting, please send your comments to the committee at TMSC, Town Manager Search Committee, at acton-mass.gov, and there's also the same information is on the town website if you've forgotten all of this. The school district We'll be having public information sessions regarding the school building proposal and the upcoming special town meeting vote on December 4th to authorize funding for building design and a feasibility study. The first session, a public session, is tomorrow, the 17th of October at 7 p.m. at the Douglas School. There's a long list on the website, along with a two-sided flyer that has all of the dates of the public meetings and also summarizes the building proposal and the purpose of the special town meeting. The planning board is holding hearings on proposed zoning bylaw amendments that, if they were to recommend so, would end up probably on our special town meeting warrant in December. In any event, the planning board is having their meeting tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. in this room. There will be a CPR and external defibrillator training on Wednesday of this week, October 18th, from 5 to 9 p.m. at the Public Safety Facility. The cost is $65. Email Tom Matthews at tmatthews@acton-mass.gov to reserve a spot, and also this information is on the town website. And finally, the Senior Center Open House is Monday, October 30th from 1 to 4 p.m. A number of people obviously already have been there. Some of us have not. And one last note, something I just discovered. Prescription drugs, if you want to get rid of them, you have extras, turn them in at the police station. I had heard from somewhere that pharmacies would accept them, and I learned from at least the CVS pharmacy in town that they are not allowed by law to accept pharmaceuticals, and my husband had some oxycodone, which he had a lot left over, and maybe it's just those kinds of drugs. But in any event, I had heard that you could just drop them off at the pharmacy, and at least some pharmacies won't accept them. So that's it for my
point of information on the drugs. There's, I believe it's Iowa, or is it Iowa or Utah? There is a state-sponsored program. If the drug is unopened and within expiration, you can send it to them and they redistribute it within the state to people without income. Thank you.
Do they pay for postage?
No, they don't.
No, forget it then. Thanks.
I'll pay for postage.
Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to be taking that CPR class actually Wednesday night, so I'm looking forward to that. The town has entered into a purchase and sale agreement for 161 Newtown Road, which is the property generally known as the Reinowitz property. The game plan is to bring it to the fall town meeting on December 4th for an appropriation out of the open space set aside. The agreed to price is $800,000. The appraised value was $770,000. So the game plan is the remaining $30K will Acton Conservation Trust will be working on a gift, and whatever they don't raise, we'll take the balance out of probably free cash. Also, we have entered into an agreement, and we'll be entering into a purchase and sale contingent on a CPA appropriation at the April town meeting for the purchase of 62 Harris Street, which is the last remaining one-room schoolhouse in Acton. It's a little hard to see that building right now because it's all overgrown with trees and whatever, but I believe it was built around 1873. It's about 900 square feet. Our appraised value was $285,000, and the owner of the property has agreed to that. I also wanted to announce that Paul Campbell, the assistant town engineer, has been promoted to town engineer. Corey York, because of all his duties as a public works director, will be mainly focused on public works and be overseeing the town engineering department, but Paul will be elevated to that position. This Friday afternoon, I will be leaving for the International City Management Association conference in San Antonio, Texas. It'll be my last one, and I'm going to be getting my 40th year award at that, which is scary. I'll be back late Wednesday night. Hopefully I'll be able to make ALG the next morning, but we'll see. Just a reminder, a couple things that will be on the next agenda on October 30th is the board will hear presentations on CPA applications from town departments and committees, and as we usually do, the board either sanctions them to move forward with the application to the CPC or not. And we'll be closing the warrant for the special town meeting on December 4th. That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Congratulations on surviving to 40 years. No, and may you have many more, not as a town manager, but, you know, in your retirement. In any event, we have, well, we could actually, this is not a hearing, we could actually do, right? So we could take, can we do 7:15 because it's not a hearing? It's just an appointment. All right, well, we're going to take our 7:15 a little bit early. It's a request for extension of operating hours, New England Hospitality Group, LLC, which is also known as Via Mexicano. Do you want to say a few words? We do have some material in our file about this. I guess there are two alternatives.
Yes, we would really love to be open until 2 a.m. so that we can, on the weekends, have a lounge. We understand that the city might not agree with it, and we're okay with doing it at least until midnight, if that's okay.
Okay, comments from the board? Anybody? What are the hours today?
We are only open on the weekends, Thursday through Sunday until 11.
Until 11, okay.
On the weekdays, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we are closed at 10.
Okay. And the two alternatives would be to be open until midnight and the other is to be open until 2, but they prefer 2. I think we have something in our packet from the police chief about midnight, so.
At least Fridays and Saturdays, we would really like it for the lounge purposes.
Okay, okay, Katie?
Right, I think, is the request just for extending the hours on the weekends, Friday and Saturday nights?
Yes.
Okay, and then just as a note, as Janet said, the chief did recommend going to 12 a.m. I don't think we have any other businesses that are opened past midnight. I'm not sure any are open. Lisa, do you know if there are any that are open past 11 right now, or? Just mine, okay. But so, yeah, I mean, I think my recommendation would be for now to start with trying the 12 a.m. And then, you know, we can revisit it at some point, but based on the chief's recommendation, just sort of what, you know, all of the rest of our businesses are, I think 12 a.m. makes a little more sense in this town.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah, that was my question. Is 11 o'clock, all the licenses now have 11 o'clock? Oh,
So Lisa just said
Okay, so
that they
this
can
license-
serve until 12. You have to repeat what she said because otherwise people in the audience can't hear. So she said they
okay,
can
so
serve until.
the response was they can serve until 12. This one's limited to 11, though. I don't know, was that a reason for that, or?
Our current one is only until 11, so our last call is usually 10:45.
Okay, so they're asking to extend this be the same as other businesses, Crossroads or whatever else is in Nagog. Okay, well, that's fine. I don't have a problem. And actually, you said it was only Friday and Saturday, but you're asking for Thursday through Sunday, right?
It would be beneficial for us to have Thursday through Sunday. If we can't extend it, we'd really like at least for Fridays and Saturdays.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I don't have any problem personally with Thursday through Sunday.
For what time? For midnight, you mean? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Joan? Okay. Audience?
I'm in favor Sunday through Thursday, Thursday through Sunday, 2 a.m. There are a lot of people who work second shift and don't get out to midnight. Thank you.
All right. I'm actually inclined to go along with the police chief's recommendation, just to start, and we can see how it works. But anybody want to make a motion or have any other, are there any other comments from the audience about this while I'm at it? Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the change in extension of operating hours for New England Hospitality Group LLC from Thursday to Sunday from 11 a.m. till 12 a.m.
Katie moves. Is there a second?
Second?
Peter seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining?
Thank you.
We'll see how it goes. Thank you.
Have a great evening.
All right, and now we have First item in Selectmen's business, this is kind of an interesting agenda, but anyhow, we have no timed appointments, which is actually maybe a good thing. But the first item on the Selectmen's business is applicant screening process and standards volunteer coordinating committee, and I know we have our chairman here. I don't know if we have a very detailed memorandum from Greg Hutchins, the chairman, and I see Juan is here, and then of course Charlie Aronson is here, and I don't know you, so, but maybe Greg, you'd like to introduce, or Peter, you'd like to introduce, because you're the liaison one way or the other, so.
I think the chair can probably introduce the members of the committee. Yes, you should, and, right, I see the red light on, so the microphone is already on for you.
Okay. Greg Hutchins, Parker Street. My colleagues on the committee, Jennifer Quirbies, Charlie Aronson, and Xuan Kong. Hart Millette might show up later. He is a member of the committee, but he's at a meeting at his church tonight that was to start at 6, and he was not certain how long he would have to remain at that meeting.
I don't know, do you have an executive summary of sort of the high issues, the high-level issues that you would like us to address? We do have a detailed memorandum, and as I said to you when it came in, I thought it was very well drafted. It really kind of got to the heart of some of your concerns, and it certainly made me understand some of the difficulties you've encountered, but I didn't know if you have an executive summary for lazy people who have limited attention spans.
I'm afraid I don't. I guess there's sort of one point of business. Jennifer is our clerk and our taker of minutes, and she had asked me if, because we posted a meeting of the VCC for tonight here, she asked whether we would need to keep our own set of minutes. And I didn't know the answer, so I emailed the state office at the AG's and asked them, and they said that it was really up to us, that we, the VCC, could keep our own set of minutes and vote to approve those and so forth, or we could just depend on the Selectmen's minutes and vote to approve those, as I assume you do. So we posted this as a meeting on Peter's advice because we thought there might be a quorum of us here, and in fact there are. So we're not quite certain whether we should keep our own minutes or whether we should just ask you to forward some portion, I guess, of your minutes that relate to this discussion to us. So
I think what I would suggest to make your life easier is that you have sort of a pro forma set of minutes where you just say that you basically you attended the Board of Selectmen meeting. I assume you're not going to go off somewhere and have a further discussion.
No, we're not.
Okay, you're going to adjourn and leave, but
right.
I would just suggest that you refer to the Selectmen's minutes, and then if and when they come out, which they will eventually, then you could just maybe attach them as part of your record, or attach the part, just so that she doesn't have to sort of reinvent a lot of the discussion.
Yeah, that seems.
Or you could look at the draft, and then she could use that and edit it, editing is always easier than drafting from scratch. So
that's for sure.
Whatever you do, but I think you should have something in your records just to memorialize where the record is of the discussion. But next time you should ask Peter, or you should ask the town manager's office. I'm sure we would have given you informal advice. So, but you're very conscientious. I know that. So, anyhow, maybe Peter, do you have sort of an executive summary of some of the big issues, or?
Well, I do.
Yeah.
There is a memo that's both online and in our package that the VCC members put together that highlights their questions and concerns about how they should move forward. They point out that there is apparently no formal charge anyone can find that specifies exactly what the VCC's role is in town. I do want to commend and thank the members of the committee for the very professional and organized way that you've been going about your business. I think that almost all the boards in town are at least staffed well enough or have enough volunteers on them to conduct their business, and that is due largely to your good work, and particularly Mr. Kong's work with the Chinese community in attracting more Asian members of residents of Acton to serve on boards is a very good thing. So thank you very much for your hard work and initiatives. Going through your memos, I had some comments. One question you have is whether you should identify conflicts of interest, and if so, how you go about that. When you pointed out that there was an applicant for the 53 River Street Committee that was an abutter to the property and questioned whether that was an ethical concern or not, we did consult with town council through the town manager. That is a state ethics law issue. In fact, the State Ethics Commission looks to the zoning act, the State Zoning Act, to determine whether a person has a conflict of interest under the financial prohibitions in the state ethics law. And the Zoning Act says that any abutters, direct abutters to property, or abutters to direct abutters within 300 feet of the property line, and so the state ethics law adopts that standard as saying if you live within that radius, you do have a financial conflict of interest. That can be waived by the selectmen making a determination that it's not so substantial that it would interfere with the members' responsibilities in conducting business on whatever board or committees involved. So given the complications there, I think it is appropriate to point those possible conflicts out, but I think that probably is a decision that the selectmen should make about whether there is an actual conflict of interest or whether somebody should be appointed and possibly file the paperwork necessary to remove the conflict of interest. I mean, that would be my view on that.
I mean, I think one of the things they're saying is how to define and identify applicants' conflicts of interest. So part of the issue is also even they're knowing that there is an issue that they need to bring to somebody's attention. I think obviously we do get training. Supposedly, we're supposed to go online, whatever it is, every 2 years, every year, and take that multiple choice test where you have an infinite number of chances, or at least as many chances as there are multiple choice options, to try to get the right answer before you can move on to the next question. But
yes.
and I have to say that some of the questions, the correct answers, make absolutely no sense to me. I tend to be very conservative. I think, oh, you couldn't possibly get away with that, and then it turns out that's the correct answer, and then I answer something that I think is clearly correct and it's wrong. So, but anyhow, I think that's sort of, it's figuring out a way to make them more comfortable with kind of identifying areas. Obviously, if somebody is like on the Cultural Council where Greg was before,
Right.
You have people who are applying for the grants, and they're also on the Cultural Council administering and awarding the grants, and there's clearly a conflict, so they have to disclose. They do routinely in, multiple copies, but I think they've got that sort of down so that they know to do that. I think something that would be easy, relatively easy for VCC members to be able to kind of administer some sort of guidelines so that they don't have to read, a lot of statutes would be helpful. I mean, something that applies particularly to their committee and what they do. That's sort of, because they're not necessarily going to be coming up with conflict, all of the array of potential conflicts, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, for a conflict for a particular committee like the Cultural Council, if a particular project comes in that you're have a conflict with, you can recuse yourself from that particular vote. Something like piece of property, 53 River Street, if you have a conflict, would seem to me you probably couldn't go to any meetings or you couldn't be appointed because you couldn't participate in any discussion about a master plan for a piece of property that you had a conflict with. So I think, it gets a little into the weeds here, the differences between these conflicts. You do request that it be helpful for you to meet with town council. I think that's a good idea. You have this question on the application that says, do you or your employer have any current or potential business relationship with the town of Acton that could create a conflict of interest? Maybe town council might have some suggestions for tweaking that language that would help you, because it's not only the applicant themselves, it's their immediate family members also that could create conflicts of interest. So, I mean, I don't have any particular advice about actually how to identify those. The one concern that I had seen come through was the abutters to property. And they raised the issue also, which is interesting, and maybe we need to talk to town council more about, for instance, the South Acton Train Station Committee, where we specified that residents of the South Acton Historic District would have particular slots on the committee, or the West Acton Sewer Study Committee, where people who live in West Acton or have businesses in West Acton within the sewer district, proposed sewer district, have slots on that committee. That may be a conflict, I'm not sure. But those kind of things, I think, are up to the selectmen to determine. To the extent you can point them out, your concerns, I think that would be helpful to us.
Okay.
But that would be my suggestion on that. I mean, I obviously would like to have input from other members about all these issues, and I don't know if you want to take them one at a time or...
Well, I think that they were looking for some guidance, and what I think the outcome of this discussion may be that we need to look at, all of these issues more closely and discuss further, maybe take the discussion offline, because I think they are all very good questions. I think there is an issue pertaining to the application form, which, and because given our recent discussion about inclusiveness and being tolerant of people who aren't necessarily documented in this country, do we even want to have the question about citizenship or legal
Yes.
Immigration status on the form at all? Is that really relevant? There was a big, I think, to do several years ago where I think there was a formal policy, I think it's the Board of Selectmen's policy, to say that we would allow legal residents, whether they're citizens or just, green card holders, to serve on town committees. What people haven't, I don't think, explored is what the downside would be if we opened it up to be more inclusive. I mean, are we at any risk, because it's a volunteer committee, we're not paying people. Right. Are we at any risk of just letting people volunteer on committees even if they're not documented? It just doesn't matter. Probably not, but it's something that, would go hand in hand with, the whole application form, which probably hasn't been updated in a while.
That is something that we have wondered about in our own meetings and have asked whether the citizenship question properly belongs on still belongs on the application. But of course, we can't just change it, so.
Yeah, you're in a very difficult position, I have to say. Just the whole issue of ranking candidates, and if you know something about them that you feel that the board should know about, or whatever, is that fair game for you to bring to somebody's attention, that sort of thing. But let me call on some other people. Katie?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if after a discussion tonight, we went back and Peter, probably you as liaison, because there's no longer, or we don't seem to have a formal charge for the VCC. If out of this, we put together a formal charge that I think covers a lot of these issues, that provides ongoing guidance to the VCC, I think that's better than just having it be just a conversation at the board level. And then as part of maybe when you can bring back a draft charge, that I think, we should consult with council on some of those issues to help inform some of the conflict of interest discussions, and then also bring back at the same time looking at the application form, and we can talk to council again. I agree, that was my instinct, is we should have council weigh in on what that question should be about conflicts of interest, and is there like an addendum or something that applicants should be looking at to be able to easily understand what might be a conflict of interest for them, so they would know. I don't think it doesn't make sense to have the VCC trying to dig into people's past or whatever to try to figure out that's not your role. You have to rely on people reporting it, but they need some guidance on what to report. So I think, and then having a training or discussion for you guys with town council, I think makes a lot of sense, and is wonderful that you want to do that. So I think we should talk about these issues a little bit tonight, and then if you're up for it, Peter, maybe working with one or two members of the VCC to work on a draft charge and an update to the form that addresses both the immigration issue or documentation status issue, as well as other changes we might want to make just to update the form, and then bring those back to another meeting for us to vote on, so we have something formal going forward.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of other issues. As far as informing applicants not selected, that has been my practice. That generally comes up with new committees where there might be more applicants than slots available. And I think it's probably appropriate. I mean, particularly for a new committee, I'll meet with applicants and after that, inform them if they're not selected for whatever reasons. But I'm assuming, I don't know if the selectmen agree with that, but if that makes sense.
I think you should put that kind of maybe process in the charge too, honestly, so it's clear to everybody, here's the steps, here's what the VCC does, here's what the selectmen should be doing, because we should be the ones, I agree with the memo where you sort of speak about, well, yes, you might know applicants because of their former service on other committees or how they might interact with other members of a committee. It's not necessarily appropriate for you to put that information in there, but as the selectman liaison to a committee, we're supposed to be interviewing or at least, kind of screening the candidates. So I think it should be in there as part of the process that those are the kind of issues that as selectmen you should be looking for. Because I think a lot of times it's not clear to a new selectman what you're supposed to be doing, and we all do it a little differently. I mean, I usually, if the person has attended some meetings and I've interacted with them there, then I don't, do a formal calling them or whatever, before I recommend them to Lisa to put on the agenda for approval. But I think it would be helpful to have, in addition to the charge, what sort of that process is and who does what, and so that would end with the Board of Selectmen liaison informing whoever is not selected for the committee, so they aren't left hanging.
Yeah, I agree with sort of having guidance. You can have the charge, and then you need to have some sort of guidance memo just laying out what is the VCC's responsibility and then what things in particular are the selectmen's responsibility, so that they don't worry about having to make calls on things like, who doesn't get picked. I mean, I don't have that occasion very much to tell people that they weren't picked for committees, but it does happen. I mean, as you said, with new committees, I just had a new committee and I was shocked that there were all these people who wanted to be on the sewer committee. I thought, God, I didn't realize there was this much interest in wastewater management. But anyhow, and I just thought that the courteous thing to do without being told was to let them know. The other thing that I sometimes do in the interest of time is when I'm interviewing people, I set up a time to talk with them on the phone. It's just, especially when I have a lot of people to interview, is more efficient for me. But people are different. Some people like to do face-to-face, but for me, I get a pretty good sense of people from talking to them on the phone. So, and it's probably easy for them too, because a lot of times they can take time from work, on the lunch break and talk to me. And otherwise, it's like 8 o'clock at night. I'm free, and I'll have to tell them I'm usually not. So, anyhow, but I do second what Katie's suggestions are about kind of developing a discussion draft of a charge, since there isn't one, and probably then also developing some sort of, if it's going to make the charge too cluttered to add all this sort of extra guidance delineating what the responsibilities are of the VCC as opposed to the Board of Selectmen, have a separate document kind of going into greater detail. And then that way we could, conceivably hand it out to the new selectmen, and then the VCC can hand the document out to new VCC members, and it becomes sort of part of the sort of routine. So, Joan, any suggestions, comments?
No. As the most recent selectman and a new committee, the dog park committee, I don't want to say anything, but it's been a difficult situation.
So would it have been helpful to have some of this guidance? Is that what you're?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I think that would be important. And then Peter, and I think there were kind of two other issues on the memo here. One was about sort of should the VCC note if people have a preconceived idea of what the results should be. And I view that one as differently than saying whether or not you think there will be personality conflicts. I think if somebody comes into you and says, I think, and I ran into that with the master planning process, right? There were definitely, for the Main Street Master Planning Committee, I think there were people that came in with a set idea of what they wanted the outcome to be. And so knowing that, I think is important when the selectmen are making a decision about who to appoint. So I think that would be helpful if it comes up in your interview process for the VCC to note. And then I think there was something about if you should rank candidates, and I don't think so, because I think you just give us the relevant information and then the selectman liaison kind of internally ranks them, but.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think
that's fine. I think that what we on the VCC have been doing is kind of winging it.
Yeah, very well though.
In our approach to dealing with these issues. For example, bringing up the potential for a conflict of interest in our recommendation to the selectman liaison to the given committee, rather than us taking a position on does this person or have a conflict or do they not. And Charlie writes our recommendations now. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, that we have mentioned people that we had the concern that they had a predetermined outcome. And I think we mentioned that in our recommendations. And we're happy to continue that practice if that's what you want us to do.
I think that's appropriate. I found that helpful also, and I'm not suggesting you don't identify possible conflicts of interest that you think might be a concern.
Right.
If the question gets to be whether there is an actual conflict of interest or not, I'm just saying that that's a selectman's decision. So,
right.
But you certainly can feel free to raise that issue in your recommendations. I think that's appropriate.
Okay. That's good. Thank you for the vote of confidence anyway, and what we've been doing.
The other thing you mentioned that you thought it would be helpful for either to have a member of the town's HR staff as a member of your committee, and I don't know, the HR director herself isn't a resident of town, so I don't know if there are anybody else in the department who'd be interested and lives in town, but certainly meeting with the HR director, I would suggest that's a good, in terms of interviewing techniques, and assuming the town manager thinks that the time could be made up, it would be an evening meeting, I assume, because the VCC meets at night. But meeting with the town council and HR director, I think that we certainly would encourage that. You know.
Yeah, I think a meeting where she sort of gives them some tips on interviewing technique, as opposed to a staff person becomes a member of the committee. I think that, our town staff work all day. They really,
Right.
They want to, and a lot of us also work during the day, but, they want to go home. So, other than for, special occasions, I don't want to detain them at night if I can avoid it. So, but that's a good idea.
I understand. Rereading my own memo.
It's a masterpiece, right? Yeah.
Rereading it for the millionth time, it's amazing how different it looks when I looked at it on the website as opposed to looking at it on my computer screen. It seemed like, oh my gosh, who wrote this? But I'm just trying to remember each of our points and be sure that we've at least had some kind of conversation about it. Okay, ranking candidates, no. So we will continue to send you our recommendations immediately, or within a few days following our meetings and interview of candidates.
Yeah, no,
We will not.
the ranking, that's difficult, and that really is, that should be the selectmen's responsibility, the liaison, certainly, so.
Very good.
As you're going down the list, there was also a question about, and again, this applies to new committees, which don't come up all that much often, but a couple a year anyway, I guess, about as you interview candidates, whether you should forward your recommendations immediately after you interview and vote on the recommendation, or wait until you've interviewed apparently all the candidates, I guess, that you think are going to come in for that particular slot, and then forward everybody's name at once. So I don't know how the selectmen feel about that, but.
I actually think I shouldn't talk so much because I'm the chairman, but I happen to think that, they shouldn't burden themselves with something like that, because at the end of the day, it's the liaison. And, I think that for one committee I think it was a sewer committee, the stuff was just dribbling in. It just took a while, and then all of a sudden they started pouring in. But I thought, well, I can't interview until I have, a full complement to start, because I want to see everybody. So anyhow, so I think that it's probably better for them to just put the onus on the selectmen to just sort of pick among all of the applicants, so.
Yeah, we really view ourselves as trying to be a help to you. We view that as our responsibility. We're trying to lift a little bit, at least, of the burden off the selectmen of having to do just assemble basic information about applicants, qualifications, background, experience, motivation, why did you join, or why did you volunteer to join this particular committee? We're certainly not interested in actually choosing people for committees. We're under no illusions that that's what we're supposed to be doing. Okay, well, okay. Well, I guess we've touched on all of the things in our memo, and thank you very much for agreeing to meet with us and for agreeing to schedule some time for us with the council and HR. And I assume we'll be working with Peter to set these things up.
Yeah, well, thank you, Greg, and all the committee members. I think that the VCC's role really has ramped up substantially in the time that I've been on volunteer committees. I think it really, and I've noticed it in sort of just the material that comes to us, the recommendations and the time that you take to sort of analyze the candidates and pinpoint certain issues for our attention. I think it's very, very useful. It really is important for us because it gives us a little bit of a platform to work with when we then in turn talk to the candidates, and just, you know, it's more eyes and ears looking. It always is all to the good. But thank you very much, and for this very thoughtful memorandum, which I think flags a lot of issues that, yeah, need to be addressed, and we need to address it. So, yeah.
I owe a tremendous debt to Charlie, because, of course, Charlie was the committee chairman for, I don't know how many years.
Charlie did it all, right?
He really did, and I'm new. I mean, I've been the chair since July 1st, so, and Charlie writes our recommendations now. So, you know, to the extent that the committee works well at all, it's really thanks to Charlie.
You're very modest, Greg. I'm sure that you contribute a great deal too. So, and I know that from the Cultural Council times that you were very conscientious and very thorough. So, but thank you all for this, and I look forward to seeing the draft charge and guidelines and all that, and kind of,
Sure.
you know, pinning down a lot of these issues.
Oh, did you want to talk about the volunteer recognition?
We don't require, yeah, we're going to talk about that. That's really on us to
And you don't-
discuss.
okay.
We do not require you to be present, so you're free to go home and watch whatever game is on television, or no game, if there isn't any. I have no idea.
There was, to some fans in the room, there are important games tonight. Not to most fans.
You said Yankees
The
playing?
Yankees are playing, yeah.
I should know. If the Yankees are playing, my husband would have said, but, you know, anyhow. All right, well,
You're also welcome to stay, since I did get some
Yeah.
ideas about the topic from VCC, so.
Okay, well, we'll decide amongst ourselves. I actually am supposed to be at another meeting tonight for a private board. We'll see whether I actually get there.
thanks, Greg. All right. Well, the next item on the agenda is volunteer recognition award discussion. This is your baby, Peter, so maybe you'd like to talk about what you had in mind.
Yeah, following up on our annual goal setting, where we set as a short-term goal to come up with a process for recognizing outstanding volunteers that we have in town. I did initially meet with the VCC thinking that they probably had the best overview of who has served on boards in town, and for the longest period of time, or various different boards. Their response was, we really don't see that. We interview initial candidates, but we don't follow up with them afterwards. It seems to me that the Board of Selectmen are probably in the best position to pick candidates to recognize in a ceremony, because we are liaisons to all the different boards in town, and we work with every one of them, split up between the 5 of us. We talked also about length of service. I talked to the VCC about how do you come up with criteria for recognizing volunteers, length of service. I'm not sure that works. It generally is not available except for the time that people have spent on their current board. I don't think the town keeps records of all the time each volunteer has spent on every board in town, and it would be too difficult to try to figure that out. Many volunteers do serve on multiple boards over a long period of time. Charlie raised the issue of a rule that has been mentioned. I'm not sure it actually exists, of having a limit of 2-3-year terms on boards, unless there's somebody, unless nobody else is volunteering to take your place. That, if it does exist, has been honored in the breach, as far as I'm aware. There are several boards in town that members just keep getting reappointed for long periods of time, and certain boards, I'm sure there would be, if they opened up, new applicants who would be very interested in them. But there is a statute apparently that requires the cultural council to turn over every few years or something?
I think it's every 2 terms, it's 6 years.
Okay.
And so I think, but you go away for a year, and if you really want to come back, you can, but in my time, I haven't noticed anybody coming back. It's a wonderful committee, but yeah.
Right,
Yeah, and you're right. I think that probably the honoring and the breach of the term limit, it's probably started where we had committees that had no applicants. I think that there are committees that will attract applicants, and then there are no openings, and I'm not sure what to do about, my concern is about the committees that aren't attracting applicants, and then, you have a problem with quorum and all that sort of thing, but anyhow, yeah, well, go ahead.
Okay, then there was the question of exactly which committees would be included. FinCom, is it just committees where the selectmen appoint members, or other committees? FinCom, obviously appointed by the moderator. I would suggest not including elected committees like the library, the housing authority. They're not really a town board anyway. I don't know if the election commissioners are elected, are they? No. Okay. Retired members of committees. One of the biggest problems that I considered thinking about this is the open meeting law. We cannot do this in executive session, obviously, and it's inappropriate to be discussing various candidates in open session. So my recommendation is, despite all of these questions, that we move ahead in this manner, and I think the special town meeting is probably the appropriate time to do this. We already set aside, well, the new moderator has instituted a policy where the annual Employee of the Year award will be before town meeting actually starts, so it's not taking up town meeting time. But that's a fairly public ceremony. It'll take some time. Usually the public safety personnel all show up to honor the employee from public safety who gets the award. People's family members are there. I don't think it would be appropriate to take away from that and adding more time by having also volunteer recognition. So that's why I would suggest the special town meeting. I think we just come up with a general standard that recognizes volunteers who have contributed to the town through exemplary service over a long period of time, or something like that. We all know many of them, and one of the biggest problems is we can't recognize them all. I think we also need to limit the number of people because we couldn't do 20 at once, but we need to start somewhere. So my suggestion is we do it with 5, and just like the Employee of the Year, I think they're recommended by the department heads. Each one of us recommend one person from the various boards that we liaison to, and recognize them at the special town meeting in December. Also recognizing that it's not saying that other people aren't deserving, but we have to start somewhere.
Katie?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to have a recognition. We have a lot of people that dedicate a lot of hours and give a lot to our town. I think 5 might be a lot, and I kind of wonder if we do 1 a year, like with the town employee recognition, and maybe it works that each selectman can recommend one person, but it only goes to like maybe the chair or the chair and the vice chair, and they decide on the final person, sort of like how the town manager does it. I assume you're the one that picks the employee. So, department heads can recommend staff, and then Steve ultimately picks, and then and then it's announced at town meeting. And I kind of wonder if we could do a similar thing, where we each have the option of recommending one person, and then either the current chair or chair and vice chair picks. And then the only question I have about special town meeting is we don't necessarily always have one. and it's not at the same time every year. So that would be my only concern about hinging it on doing it at a special town meeting. I mean, if we feel comfortable that we're going to typically have a fall town meeting, and then I guess, I don't know if we don't, do we do it at April town meeting? And I think we do town meetings usually at least 2 nights, and we do the employee recognition on this before the start of the second night, so we could do this one before the start of the first night if we wanted, of regular town meeting, or annual town meeting, if we wanted to make sure we, always had a town meeting to do it at, but not, I agree with not trying to take away from the time or adding to the time of the employee recognition events before the second night of annual town meeting. But those are just my thoughts. I think it's a good idea, like you said, to start somewhere with just recognizing and thanking people for their work. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily know about what a lot of volunteers have done and what they've contributed to town. And I think it's also a way to, raise that volunteer opportunities are out there and that all of these committees exist, and it might get more people who are coming to town meeting interested in knowing about these, when I think some people show up to town meeting but don't really know the breadth of work that our volunteer or various committees do. I mean, but we have a surprising number of boards and committees in town. And otherwise, I agree with your recommendations of not including elected volunteers and only having appointed people who are appointed by the Board of Selectmen, I would think. And then in terms of whether or not to include retired, that's tough just because we're starting it now, and so there are people that I think probably should be recognized, but then going forward, do we want to do retired? So I don't know. I'd be interested in what other people think on that one.
Yeah, we should, elected officials should be omitted because we have the glory of winning the election, that's just our reward. Anyhow, Joan, do you have any comments?
I think it should be at the annual town meeting on the alternate night, and I would recommend 1 per year.
Okay, I hadn't thought about multiple night town meetings, so that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, and I'm okay with Katie's solution to the open meeting law too. So we would each send a name with a short reason why we think they deserve the award, and to the chair and the vice chair, and they would make the decision. I'm okay with that.
Okay, I've been back and forth with Peter since I'll be the last one to talk on this issue, and my concern is it was a little fuzzy, and initially he was talking about just sort of going, we were talking about longevity, and I said, well, the problem is that the list that you have of people who have served 15 years or more is incomplete, because I know people who've been 15 years or more in committees that aren't there, and then are you accounting for the multiple committees that people have served on, which collectively generate a lot of years on a committee? And I know the clerk's office doesn't have everything searchable. It's not all electronic. So, and it seems to be a lot of work, involve a lot of work whenever there is a need for us to track down how many years somebody has served on a committee for purposes of recognition. So, and I don't know if that's something we could have an intern work on 1 year. Just go back go back to the 1980s and sort of digitize all records. I don't know how far back some of our volunteers go, but at some point, we don't have to go back, too far. Maybe we could just go back to the 90s, but I think there might be some volunteers who, but it's of course, the longer we wait, the less far back we have to go, because we're only going to have so many volunteers that have been on that long. But one of my concerns, I think that if we reduce it to 1, then what that does is it means you're going to have a bunch of people who maybe thought they should be receiving the award and are disappointed. So misery loves company. Whereas if you have more, then people start wondering, well, what is it that, I don't know. I was worried about fairness, and certainly if you're talking about just longevity, I was very worried about not having really good records and accidentally, inadvertently leaving out somebody who would qualify based on whatever the qualifications were. But now, my one concern about our just sort of each of us picking somebody from all of our committees who we think is deserving, is that it's a little bit nebulous, and I think it would be helpful to know some basic standards are. We know, oh, well, extraordinary contributor, blah, 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 but, you know, my concern is that if it's just left to each of us to decide on somebody, that there may be some assertions that we're being unfair, or, you know, we're picking favorites or something like that. I mean, you'd like to think that there's consensus, that there's, you know, about who really deserves recognition, but, you know, that's my one concern about having a lot of the discretion left to us without sort of trying to define what we are looking to recognize. You know, I don't know, Mr. Manager, when you're picking Employee of the Year, do you have a roster or some sort of description, or you just sort of wing it?
Well, it's a little different because, you know, employees have job descriptions, so what I really look for are people that kind of go outside the job description to do, you know, extraordinary things that normally you wouldn't expect them to do.
I mean, I think that's true with volunteers too, and anything we put out there that we say, these are sort of what we're looking for, I mean, that, it's all gonna be up to us to decide what that really means. So I think we can put maybe criteria so it's clear to people, you know, what we're sort of basing it on, but that's up to our interpretation then, and I think it really is people that go above and beyond. I mean, all of our volunteers are going above and beyond because they are volunteering their time to do this, but there are certain people that we know that, you know, I think go the extra mile in a lot of committees, and sometimes that's people that, you know, have served on 5 different committees, or somebody that came up with a really great idea on one committee. You know, I think over time it will evolve and be different things that, you know, will compel one of us to recommend somebody, but I think that that's sort of the point, and I hope that most people are you know, adult enough in town to understand, as Peter said, when, you know, when you're recognizing somebody, it's not snubbing other people, and I think we should have a little thing that we say ahead of time, and we have the event that you started putting together last year where we invite all boards and committees to thank them, that we had at NARA, and so I think there's that aspect of it, of thanking everybody, and then just also saying, you know, we want to recognize certain people that we think kind of stand out, and that's up to us to determine what that means. But, you know, I mean, it's like at your work or anywhere, school or wherever, you know, people get awards, and I think people, for the most part, are happy for those people. And you know, again, it's not a one-year thing. If we do this every year, stay in a board long enough, you'll probably get recognized. Yeah. But, you know, and you will.
And of course, this is assuming that the 5 of us are going to reach consensus on the one person. Right? Yeah,
that's why I'm saying
the chairman and the vice chairman.
Right, because we can't talk about it in open meeting.
Yeah,
so
that's, no, that's, initially when Peter was talking about longevity, I was really concerned about that, because I thought, you know, there are people, people who volunteer as opposed to sitting at home and doing whatever are going above and beyond. But, you know, among people who have served a long time, there's some people who really have gone really, truly above and beyond, and there are some people who are just, you know, there. And I just thought that I didn't like recognizing longevity just for the sake of longevity, given that there are people who have been on boards for 5 years who are just incredible. And, you know, they have to stay on the board for another 10 years to get recognition based on, you know, longevity. So I like this approach better of, you know, incorporating, well, it's, you know, it's going to be quality. It's a little bit of merit, and it's sort of unavoidable. But, yeah, this is not going to be where, you know, the year-end thing is where everybody gets to be, you know, pat himself on the back. But, you know, I think, yeah, it's not going to be just showing up and getting recognized. It's for this. So, yeah, I like the way it's developing. So.
If we're not going to do it to the annual town meeting, then we can take some more time. We can try to, you know, come up with a list of things we would consider. And if we were to recognize volunteers, we could do a narrative that would explain the reasons why we think that person is deserving of the award. So I think we're moving in the right direction. You know, we can, I do think that maybe more than one is appropriate, but we can figure that out. So we'll keep working on it. And I think the chair of the VCC has some input.
And I would just put in my vote for annual town meeting and putting it somewhere the first night or something, it really doesn't have to detract from the other activities, and, you know, it can be on the first night, and it's going to be pretty brief. I mean, it doesn't take long to read the testament to the person and present and get applause, and then we start, so.
Yeah, that's fine. That resolves my problem with the annual town meeting. I didn't think about extra night, and I forgot that it was on the second night that we do the employee, so.
I have one thought question that might be a little out there. I think the employee awards are sponsored by the Steinberg Lally Foundation, and I wonder if there's something similar that we should seek for this as well. You know, I don't think we necessarily have to give people monetary, you know, recognition, but it might be worth the town manager or more, somebody, you know, reaching out and seeing if there is a local business or charitable person who would want to, you know, have this named after them or something, or and would make a contribution that then we could, you know, either give some sort of certificate to something, or, you know, a plaque or something like that, or do we just spend some town funds and make a plaque, and do we want to, I guess my question is, do we want to name this award after anybody? And if it's not somebody that's doing something, is there somebody that, you know, in the history of the town that, you know, kind of embodies volunteerism that we think it would be worthwhile to name an award after?
I know we have a plaque to Francis Faulkner here. Was every single position in town while he was
could be
fighting
a
at Bunker Hill and White Plains as well, so if that's the
Could be like
standard.
the
maybe-
Francis Faulkner Volunteer Award, you know,
yeah,
I just feel like
yeah.
maybe there's something there that makes it sound fancy.
Right, yeah. I think we didn't mention that, but certainly a certificate, but also some other kind of medallion or some
There are plaque that's
recognition,
in
right?
town,
Yeah, a
people's
town hall
name
plaque
too.
that would have list names, and I can meet with Steve and
Yeah, maybe
Lisa
brainstorm
and talk
that.
about those kind of things and see whether there's any businesses in town that might be interested in sponsoring it.
Mr. Chairman.
Hi. This kind of speaks to one of our VCC's recommendations in the memo, which was that we need to, that we suggest that the town maintain records of past volunteer service of town residents. As I understand it, the town clerk presently is able to tell you who all the current members are of all the different committees, but does not have records of people who have left one committee or another, disbanded committees, you know, ad hoc committees that have fulfilled their function and have then been dismissed. We don't have, to my knowledge, the ability to access that information, that John Q. Public has been on this committee and then this one and then this one and so on. And I think that kind of a record certainly would help in this, you know, considering something like this. I can tell you that I can think of one gentleman who has been on a committee since 1972, when I was a high school sophomore and never heard of Acton. So that's long-term service right there, 1972. And there have been other people. There's another volunteer that I seem to have kind of followed her into each of the committees that I've been on. She was on before me. And so I just kind of keep taking her place. As she leaves, I show up. I didn't plan it that way, but it just seems to have kind of turned out that way. And that individual does still volunteer on at least one other committee in town. So there are so many people that have just done spectacular amounts of work.
Thanks, Fred. That was what I was getting at, that for people who have been on committees for a while, if you want to verify, you have to go into the hard copy town reports. The clerk or somebody in the office will go through all of the committee reports and look for names. And, you know, that's really, that you can do that for one person, but to do it for a whole slew of people, and, you know, chances are you're going to miss somebody. Of course, we didn't have computers in the old days. Today, you could have all kinds of spreadsheets and sort them and all sorts of things, but somebody needs to do all the inputting. So it's a project for somebody to work on in his or her free time. So, but thank you. Is there anything else, or do you feel as if you have a good sense of where you're going to go next?
Yeah, I'll keep working on these issues and point toward the town meeting in April as kicking this off. So.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, item number 4 is Regional Transportation Advisory Council and Lowell Regional Transit Authority Advisory Board appointments and reappointment of acting representatives. This is essentially the result of Mike Gowing's stepping down as Acton's RTAC representative. He does wish to continue as a representative on the LRTA Advisory Board if we are so inclined to have him do so. And so at this point, we could, if people are inclined to have him continue, we could vote to reappoint him. The RTAC position, I had asked Franny Osmond if she had any interest in serving. She said she would think about it. I haven't heard from her, which suggests a lack of enthusiasm, but if any of you knows of anybody based on the material in our packet who might be a good fit for the RTAC position, just let me know, and we can take it up later. But that position, the RTAC position, I think Mike is stepping down. I forget when he said the next meeting. This end of month, and then their next meeting, I guess, is in November. So it would be good if we could, maybe we can take this up again at October 30th. So, but in the meantime, the position stays open. So does somebody want to move with regard to the LRTA Advisory Board rep?
I will move to reappoint Mike Gowing as Acton's representative to the Lowell Regional Transit Authority Advisory Board.
Katie moves in, Joan seconds. Any comments, questions from the audience? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstaining. Okay, great, thank you. And then finally, under Selectmen's business, it's the recreational marijuana law. I went to a seminar on October 3rd. It was given by the Mass Municipal Lawyers Association, and it was really talking sort of about legal issues with regard to the marijuana law, but a couple of issues came out of that made me think that I need to put this topic on the agenda again because I want some guidance. And here are the 2 questions I have that I want sort of guidance on, and then I'll explain what the context is. One is, does the board want to pursue local ballot election prior to next March to prohibit recreational marijuana shops? And 2, if not, is the board prepared to authorize me to submit comments to the Cannabis Control Commission, urging the commission to honor local moratoria, including Acton's, assuming that the December 4th special town meeting approves the same. And the context for this is that the panel at the October 3rd forum said that it's unclear what the Cannabis Control Commission is going to do until the final regulations are out, which is supposed to be March 15th of next year. The law is not a master of draftsmanship, and there are a lot of muddy areas that the regs presumably will clarify. But one question that's come up is whether, because there are a lot of communities that have adopted moratoria going into 2018, whether the commission is going to honor those, because some of these attorneys were saying, well, the commission might say, well, we don't really know what the motivation is, and they could just choose not to honor them. And one of the concerns is that, assuming the regs issue March 15th, then the commission is going to start looking at applicants April 1st, and they're going to start with already licensed medical marijuana facilities that are interested in also becoming recreational marijuana shops. And because those those entities will have already been vetted at the state level if they're licensed. And so the concern is that, okay, so this will leave, if towns are inclined to manage the presence of recreational marijuana in town, they may be motivated to just pursue a ban without knowing what the regulations are going to provide, just so that come next March, if the commission is so ill-advised as to disregard the presence of a moratorium, a locally approved moratorium, they'll be ready. They'll be able to avoid sort of the worst-case scenario. Now, I have reservations about just pursuing a ballot initiative to ban marijuana without knowing what the regulations are, because I think the regulations are probably going to do a lot of clarification, and they may allay some of the concerns that people have about the law as it is, because that's what regulations do. They fill in the gaps. But and I'm prepared to I could talk with the town manager as well, put together comments to submit to the Cannabis Control Commission. They did a listening tour, I guess last month. It was, I think, about 8 different places, none of which was terribly convenient. I think Worcester was the nearest place where I would have considered going to offer comments, but I didn't, and they've already stopped their listening tour. But what we learned at this forum was that people can still submit written comments to the commission. And so my feeling is that if we're not going to pursue, we're not interested in doing this sort of preemptive ballot initiative to bar marijuana, then we would be wise to weigh in on the issue of the moratorium and urge the commission to honor it. Because the whole point of a moratorium, and for most of these communities, to give them a time to see what the regulations are going to be, and then to make a reasonable assessment of what they're going to do next. And an unintended consequence, if the rumor gets around that the commission isn't going to honor the moratoriums, is to drive communities to ban recreational marijuana, which may not be what the commission really wants to have happen. So anyhow, those are that's my explanation, and then I just need guidance on those 2 issues. Katie.
Well, I think I made it clear at the last meeting we discussed this, that I'd be opposed to a ballot initiative at our local election, both because the regulations are not out yet, and because I don't think we should be voting at a local election on this issue. At the very least, I think it should be a statewide election. Preferably, I think it should be another presidential election, because that's when this town voted to support recreational marijuana in the ballot initiative at this prior presidential election. And I would be fine with the chair submitting comments. I think it would just have to, if you're submitting them before December 4th, making it, not saying, we haven't voted on a moratorium yet, but just saying generally if towns pass a moratorium.
We're putting it on our warrant, and
Right.
the plan is to vote. If it passes, it would be nice to know that it's actually going to be honored by the commission.
Right, I'm just saying, I think
Yeah.
if we're submitting comments prior to the
Yeah.
town voting on a moratorium, that the comments should be neutral and not presupposing that a moratorium passes in Acton. Because but if it's the will of
No,
town meeting.
I intend to be incredibly biased and just.
No, but I just want to make, just for the public to know too, I think if we're submitting comments, it's not, this board hasn't even recommended an opinion on a warrant article yet, so, but yeah, I think as long as we're saying.
The only issue I'm going to address is the one about the moratorium, because if you've taken a look at the law, it's just complicated, and there were so many questions that came up at this forum, and a lot of times the attorneys would say, I don't know, don't know, because it depends on what the commission's going to say or think, and we don't know, so.
Right.
Anyhow.
Yeah,
Okay.
there aren't regulations yet,
Yeah.
so they really don't know, but, so I think that's.
Anybody else?
I'm trying to find it. I thought that the vote to the ballot to prohibit establishments in town had to be at a statewide
No,
election.
because there's a bunch of towns that have already had
It can be
elections.
special, it can be regular town election, special town election.
It did say that in there in the highlighted section, Peter, and I think that might be because this wasn't the final bill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I
that's
saw that,
confusing.
and I was like, no,
Okay.
but there are a number
Yeah,
of communities
okay.
that have already,
They've
Westboro
already,
is the first
they've already voted to
town.
ban it, yeah.
We'd be talking about the election in,
Well,
is it
you,
March or April of
well,
next
no,
year?
you could,
That's a
you could
statewide
set
election
it.
anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
We're
if
saying
it-
we don't want to do that.
If you wanted to do a local one, you could basically, you could set it whenever you want to, but it's just that you, the idea is if, and in our case, if we wanted to move forward, we'd obviously have to set it before the regular annual local election, because that would be too late according to what I heard at this forum, because you have to have stuff in place before April 1st. I mean, it would be, we'd have like a week. I don't know if that would, but it'd be a little bit tight, so anyhow, but yeah. All right, so you're not inclined to do the local initiative, and
No,
you want
and
to
I'm
do
okay with
comments
just sending
to the,
comments, yep.
yeah, okay.
I would be in favor of the local initiative, and I would want to write a comment on the moratorium.
Okay, so you favor, okay, local. And comments, okay. All right, well, I'll just give you I'm inclined to submit comments. I'm not inclined to pursue a local initiative until we have regulations in place and we can see something. I assume that at that point, maybe it won't be as much of an issue, but, all right, audience members.
Yes, there was 2 people here that have been speaking at the Cannabis Control Commission meetings, and they had asked me to let them know of any agenda item that comes up on the topic. So I let them know about today, and then it was taking a long time to get through the other items, and I asked Lisa about this one item, and I was led to believe that it was just going to be a discussion amongst the board, and you were just going to report. So they left. They were upset. They took off work to come talk. And I guess the next opportunity to talk is tomorrow night at the planning board meeting when these articles are going to be discussed. Is that correct? When is the next public hearing on this topic, I guess I'm asking?
Not on this. Planning board is just talking about some zoning bylaw amendment
I think
proposals.
the planning board hearing is sometime in November on this. I
On
think.
this topic,
I believe,
okay.
I don't remember the date. But I
Okay,
think
thanks.
it's-
So the article that's being proposed is a zoning article for a moratorium?
Council advised that all moratorium articles would be zoning articles.
So it's 2/3 vote?
Right.
Okay. Janet, could you summarize the position of the board as you write this, or are we going to see a draft of this letter? The reason I ask is because I'm curious as to whether or not the board is against having any recreational pot facilities, or whether the problem or the moratorium is a solution for a logistics problem.
I don't think that we've actually talked in great detail about just our positions on recreational marijuana. I know at the last meeting, we talked about the moratorium, and Katie was the one who dissented because she thinks, hey, a majority voted to support it in the town, so.
Well,
And
To be
but,
clear, the vote that I dissented on was whether or not I thought the Board of Selectmen should put a warrant article
Put it on the
on
moratorium,
the
okay.
warrant versus having citizens put it
Have
on
the
as a
citizens put
citizen's
it on, and
petition.
we-
And,
yeah.
hold on, let me just say what my
Sorry,
position
sorry.
was. And my feeling was that I think that citizens petitions and selectmen warrants have different weights. And I felt like this was an issue that was coming forward from a group of citizens, and that it was best put forward as a citizen's petition and not as a selectman's warrant article. And that's why I voted no on that. Tara, as to this letter, and that's what I was talking about, Janet's proposing to send a letter to the Cannabis Control Commission only saying that the Board of Selectmen wants the Cannabis Control Commission to recognize any moratoria that pass in communities. So we will not have passed a moratorium at that point because we're not voting on it until December 4th at the special town meeting. So it wouldn't state a position from the town of Acton either way as to whether or not we have a moratorium, but just that if towns pass moratoriums, that the Cannabis Control Commission should honor those moratoriums. And as a note, the Attorney General's office has to weigh in on all, warrant articles, and they have denied articles in a couple communities that they felt went too long. So generally, the sense has been that they're only approving moratoriums that go through the end of December 2018, and that's what this proposed warrant article in December will be. But, so it's not, and the discussion about it would be, there would be a planning board hearing on it, as it's a zoning warrant article, and the selectmen will take a position on this when we take positions on all of the warrant articles on the December 4th meeting, probably sometime in November. And then, or I guess maybe October 30th, are we doing that, or in November?
October, is it October 30th? Are we opening and closing?
But whenever we take our position on the warrant articles, and then in December is when the town will vote on a moratorium or not.
Okay, thank
But
you.
this letter is limited to the topic of moratoria.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
not a statement of the position of the board on recreational marijuana. It's just saying, you know, if a community has a moratorium, please honor it.
Thank you.
Because, you know, it's a popular, well, it's a vote, local vote, why not? But,
Yeah, I
yeah.
thank you. I hope you take some time to really learn if you don't know about pot. You know, time, just put this out. We just got this at Roach Brothers. I do my shopping at Donnellan's too. You know, marijuana goes Main Street. You know, and in there it's very detailed, scientific and medical. Where do we go from here as marijuana and its smokers come out of the closet and weeds becoming the new wine? It goes into how weed usage by kids has gone down since legalization. I really urge you to take some time and learn. I think that the positions that these folks were going to advocate for is for small local farmers to have access to the licenses. I know that there are cooperatives and whatnot that are helping to keep weed local, as opposed to the big weed that's coming in to kind of take over the institutionalization, the licensing, and it's becoming a social justice issue. And I hope that whether you're for pot or against pot, that if the will of the people is that pot is legal, that we work as social justice advocates to make sure that it's accessible. Thank you. Both
Thank
to
you.
license it to grow and sell and to use. So, but that's taking care of itself. But thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, I think Littleton, Mr. Manager, I think I was talking to the Littleton Town Administrator, and they've got somebody who's growing, they're getting a lot of money from it, but it's inside, it's indoor growing.
Yeah, you have to see, the
Small
problem
scale,
is that to
but-
be accessible, so a lot of this vote was about making sure that things were accessible. If you are a small-time farmer, to be ready for April, you gotta be starting now. And so if you're then saying, well, it's gonna be 6 months after to be able to sell, now you've put a tiny, small farming business basically out of reach and allows big weed to come in and get a foothold faster. So Harvard said no to the ban. I believe Harvard is moving towards licensing their first farmer there, and I hope that Acton is proactive and progressive in this issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to add one thing, because I think that the folks that were here, while you made a comment at the beginning that they were frustrated that they had taken time off and come to speak on this, but we have an agenda that's put out, and it's very clear the order of the agenda, and I don't think people should come in here assuming that their topic is going to be taken up first just because they showed up. Other people showed up for these other issues. And frankly, this meeting is running much quicker than the majority of our meetings, and we got to this issue a little after 8 p.m., which is an hour after we started. And so the manner in which they chose to leave and the manner in which they conducted themselves while here was not appropriate. And I would encourage people, when you're coming to a meeting, to look at the agenda and to have an understanding that your agenda item, when you're the last one on Selectmen's business, is very likely not going to be taken up within the hour. And so I don't, I don't appreciate that sort of, light scolding that, we apparently took too long. We have other issues to discuss. We put out an agenda with an order in which they will be discussed. Certain ones oftentimes have certain times that they at least have to be read if they're a hearing, but otherwise we take them pretty typically in the order that they are on the agenda. And so if you're going to plan to come to a meeting, you can think about how long it might take. And if you're the last one on there, I wouldn't recommend coming at 7 PM and assuming that we're going to take up your issue within the next 20 to 30 minutes, because we have other issues to get through.
Sorry,
So-
I was apologizing because I personally made a mistake. There was no agenda on the thing. I came over to talk to Lisa. It says discussion of, and I encouraged them to stay, but then when I asked Lisa, what is this discussion going to be? And then I thought she said that it was just going to be a report as opposed to a discussion. So I told them they might as well leave and come back for another hearing because they're in the middle of work and all that. So I was apologizing, I guess, to everybody for making that mistake. I thought that this was going to be a roundtable discussion with all of the advocates and, back and forth like it was last time. And so that's why I gave them a heads up. I really didn't know what was going on. So the next time that the pot issue is going to be a big public forum is the November 7th date. I'm not following this issue that closely, so I'm just trying to help some constituents understand when to be at what meeting, and I'd appreciate some guidance from you.
Right, so the planning board hearing would be the next date that warrant article is discussed. But again, when you're leaving a meeting, when you're at a meeting, you should conduct yourself with some sense of decorum, and how they acted here was not. And so I would just like to make that clear, that I was not appreciative of that.
I totally understand. I'm trying to help newer people come into the process, and so you don't have any plans to put the topic on as a public forum anytime between now and the planning board hearing?
Not right now, no.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. All right. The planning board meeting is tomorrow on the zoning bylaw things. It's not on this issue. Haven't heard about that. I didn't realize there was another thing coming up in November. So anyhow, consent agenda. Consent agenda, accept gifts, Council on Aging, Board to accept gift valued at $3,050 to be utilized for building furnishings for the new senior center. Item 7, Red Ribbon Week proclamation. Item 8, private way plowing fees. Item 9, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Congregation Beth Elohim, November 5, 2017. Item 10, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Arena Buchalton, November 23, 2017. Eagle Scout Court of Honor, Jack S. Peterson, November 25, 2017. That's mine. Item 12, committee appointment, Dennis Caristi, full member, Sidewalk Committee. Item 13, accept gift, Planning Department, Board to accept a gift totaling $4,400 from 248 High Street LLC for Adeline Way development in lieu of sidewalk construction. Item 14, accept gift, Acton Police Department Board to accept a gift from Digital Federal Credit Union totaling $3,500 to support providing programs that make a difference in the community. Item 15, accept gift, Acton Fire Department Board to accept a gift from Digital Federal Credit Union totaling $3,500 to support programs that make a difference in the community. Item 16, accept gift, Recreation Department Board to accept a gift totaling $1,000 from Especially for Pets for funding a new recreation facility and playground at Jones Field. Item 17, accept gift, Recreation Department Board to accept a gift from Enterprise Bank totaling $1,000 for funding a new recreation facility and playground at Jones Field. Item 18, waiver of fee request, Recreation Department Board to accept a waiver of fee request for $5,000 to benefit paralyzed
It's not
veterans.
for $5,000, it's for a 5K race.
5K, for a 5K race to benefit Paralyzed Veterans of America, November 11, 2017. Waiver of test pit fee request, Tonundi Farm. Request to dispose of obsolete material, Acton Memorial Library.
Motion to approve consent agenda items 6 through 20.
Is there a second? Okay, Katie moves and Joan seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Okay, Katie moves and Peter seconds. Any further discussion? I hope not. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstaining.